Greetings everyone, and welcome to my channel. I'm your host, Captain Rye, and today's video comes to us courtesy of SPR 101st. And SPR is playing in the underpowered and in need of much love Tier 9 German destroyer, the Z46, here in World of Warships. As the battle gets underway, it's Trap, it's Domination match mode, the only match mode on this map, and SPR is headed off to the B cap point. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the German destroyer line, you might be wondering why it's considered underpowered and in need of much love. Well, that has to do with a couple of key disadvantages that the German destroyer lines have. Specifically, the detectability range on these ships is not as good as the American or Japanese counterparts. The smokescreen generator and smokescreen duration are not as good as any of the other destroyer or even cruiser smokescreen counterparts. The torpedoes are very weak indeed. In fact, at the top tier 10, the maximum damage your torpedoes will do is 14,000. And when you combine things like captain skills, modules, and ship torpedo bulge protection, especially on battleships, it means you're not going to do a lot of damage. In fact, if you're using the Z52 and you're hitting a broadside Yamato with torpedoes, you're going to do about 8,000 to 9,000 damage with each torpedo hit. So the damage on the torpedoes is not good. Their range is not the best either, comparatively speaking, being a few kilometers or 0.5 kilometers short of their equal tier counterparts in the American and Japanese line. So you have low damage torpedoes that don't go as far, but you make up for that in the fact that these torpedoes reload incredibly fast. With captain skill and module, you can get the reload on these torpedoes down to just over a minute. The other disadvantage that these ships have, aside from the smokescreen and their underpowered torpedoes, is also the fact that the developers decided to make these destroyers thick. In spite of the fact that ships like the Gearing and the Harborosk are actually thicker than these boats, for whatever reason, these destroyers eat armor-piercing shells like nobody's business. Where in a normal destroyer, you might have a battleship with 16-inch guns shoot at you, do some damage with some over-penetrations. In something like the German destroyers here, the Z46, the Z52 especially, they'll shoot you and they'll pretty much wreck you, taking off most of your health, because the normalization on the shells means that those shells do more damage as they slice through you. So these ships have some significant disadvantages. When you add them all up together, they end up being an incredibly tricky and difficult line to play. So aside from having a quick torpedo reload, the other advantages that these destroyers have are that they come equipped with Hydroacoustic. And as you can see here, SPR is using that hydro to keep some ships on the other side of this island at the B cap point spotted. Of course, he's also being detected by Hydroacoustic from that cruiser over there, and that's resulting in him taking in shots. Fortunately, those shots don't seem to be doing too much damage. Now, the Hydroacoustic that you get up to Tier 9 isn't the best. It's something. It's usable. It's good for detecting torpedoes coming into your smokescreen if you've happened to pop it, or detecting ships around an island. But given your detection range and the acquisition range of ships with the Hydroacoustic up to this point, it's not the best. At Tier 9, you get a little bit of an improvement, and at Tier 10, you get the German cruiser Hydro, which means that your detectability range of 6.1 kilometers is only 0.2 kilometers larger than your Hydroacoustic's ship acquisition range. So you can actually push in, basically see what's spotting you, slam on your brakes, pop a smoke screen, pop the hydro, and then just wail on them. Now, SPR wisely decides to leave the B cap point. He's not doing any good up there. There's at least one destroyer that's up there, and there's at least a cruiser as well. The other advantage that the German destroyer has is that it's also got German armor piercing. So the armor piercing is a little bit heavier than your standard 127mm armor piercing that you might expect to find on, say, the Japanese or the American destroyers, or even the Russian destroyers. The shell arcs from the guns are also significantly flatter, meaning you're going to get a lot more standard penetrations with the armor piercing when it's fired. And because it's a heavier armor piercing, it has better normalization characteristics, which means you can fire at angled boats and still normalize that shell and get regular penetrations. However, I see a lot of destroyer captains in the German line will only fire armor piercing. Because apparently, people forget that they also have high explosive, and the high explosive on the German destroyers is not actually bad. It's about as good as the American high explosive, at least as far as setting fires goes. But when you're shooting at something like, say, this destroyer here, the high explosive would do a better job, in my opinion. Well, SPR is getting those penetrations. If he was using the high explosive, he could be knocking out modules as well, including engines, torpedoes, and guns. And knocking out those things is an incredibly effective tool when dealing with the destroyer. Now, SPR did manage to cause some damage with that destroyer with his armor piercing, but I felt, again, with the high explosive, he would have been able to do a bit better. But now he's got the armor piercing loaded here, and he's got a broadside cruiser, and here we can really see what this German armor piercing can do. Just look at that. He manages to do over 3k salvo with his armor piercing, because the shell arcs are significantly flatter than the rainbow arcs associated with the American cruiser line. And because of that, the shells managed to hit that broadside, and they managed to cause a significant amount of damage. If he was firing the high explosive, yeah, he probably could have aimed a little higher, hit the superstructure, and of course if he was in an American destroyer, he would have had those wonderful rainbow arcs coming in onto the superstructure, and would have been causing some damage, but not nearly as much. So with the armor piercing loaded on the broadside of even battleships at closer range, you can still cause a significant amount of problems. Now here we see the armor piercing being used against a broadside battleship off in the distance, and you can see the shell arcs is a bit higher, but they're still coming in relatively flat compared to, say, the American destroyer line. But you'll notice that he's getting a lot of ricochets and a lot of bounces off of that. In this particular case, especially when shooting at a battleship, switch to the high explosive. And finally, SPR does just that. Switching to the high explosive, you've got the shots coming down onto the deck like that. Now he's causing some damage. And, well, he's getting a lot of shatters. You see there, he managed to set a fire. And that's really what you want to do in a destroyer when you're dealing with a battleship. You want to set them on fire. You want to make them burn. You want them to force them to pop that repairability before your torpedoes reach him. Or, even better, you want them to be on cooldown with their repairability so that you can set that fire and then watch them burn down. Now, at this point in the game, SPR's team is not doing the best. The enemy team currently in the points lead. SPR's team does have 2 of the caps, though, and that's going to play an important factor at the end of this game. But the enemy team currently has a slight advantage with points. However, both teams are about equal as far as ships goes, but SPR's team has the destroyer advantage. And you know what I always say about the destroyer advantage? The team that has it can usually pull out a victory just because destroyers are sneaky, and when played really well and really appropriately, can prove to be the key to victory as far as capping, stealth torpedo launching, and just continuing harassing fire. It also helps if you're coordinating your attacks with your other destroyers. Of course, the enemy team manages to sink one of their destroyers, and now both teams are equal on destroyers. And the enemy team is capping C. They have A, they're capping C, there's no contest at C, so they're going to go ahead and gain that, and they're going to be able to start gaining those points again. And SPR's team has now got themselves in a bad position because they are only down to 5 ships. So the enemy team definitely has the ship advantage, and they have 2 caps. SPR tries to pop a speed boost to get a smoke screen up for that very low health cruiser. Unfortunately, he doesn't quite reach that cruiser in time, and the cruiser ends up getting sent to the bottom. Now, what I was saying earlier about the torpedo reload, as you can see there, the reload on these torpedoes is incredibly fast. So while they don't do a lot of damage, if you find yourself in this situation, you don't need to do a lot of damage. You really just need to send a wall of skill. Send a set of torpedoes, hit 1 or 2, cause a little bit of damage, hopefully cause flooding, and then send another set. And by the time those second set reaches the ships again, they're in a bad situation because their damage control and repair is off, so now you're going to do more damage to them, and hopefully cause more floodings and more problems. Now SPR's got the high explosive loaded again. He's setting that Iowa on fire, manages to sink the cruiser that was in the smoke screen there. That's excellent, and it's excellent for his team as well. If you look at the situation, his team is in sore need of sinking enemy ships. Now SPR pops his Hydroacoustic because an enemy destroyer, a Fletcher, very dangerous tier 9 destroyer, popped up there, and there is a possibility that there could be torpedoes in the water. Now in this particular case, this Iowa is very low health, and he's burning down, but he's just barely hanging on there. Now SPR switched back over to the armor piercing. Again, I wouldn't recommend doing that, especially because there's a destroyer up here and you're going to go ahead and engage him. When dealing with something like the Fletcher, the high explosive will do just fine. She's not as thick as the Gearing. Now the Gearing is a thick boat and she's got a bit thicker armor, so broadside onto her, the armor piercing isn't going to do as well as, say, the high explosive would. But in this particular case, shooting at the Fletcher with high explosive is going to knock out modules, knock out guns, knock out engines, knock out rudders, and hopefully, possibly set this guy on fire. But you can see here that the armor piercing is causing damage, and other than a few bounces, it's pretty good at normalizing. And he does manage to take out that Fletcher, so that Fletcher is now down and out of the game. And that's just going to leave the enemy team with 1 destroyer to SPR's team's 2. However, the enemy team has 4 ships to SPR's 3. But SPR's team still has those 2 destroyers. Now, as you can see, the enemy team is in the process of capping B. So that's going to give the enemy team the absolute advantage for points and caps because they're going to have all 3 of them. Plus, right now, they still have a ship's advantage. And SPR's got himself a degrosser pushing up there. There's a smoke screen back there, and that could probably and should probably indicate what's back there. That's likely to be a destroyer. We know where one was, and that destroyer has been sunk. Fortunately, that was the Fletcher, and with the Fletcher out of the way, you can really kind of breathe easier, if you will, over the situation. SPR has to pop his smokescreen as he's detected by aircraft, and now he's being detected by Hydroacoustic, and that Hydroacoustic is possibly coming from the degrosser, but you'll notice that the Hydroacoustic has worn off, so that's excellent for SPR. That means he can sit in his smokescreen and not worry too much about the situation. Now he's got the high explosive loaded here. He's going to try and reset the cap by hitting the degrosser, and you can see there he's getting a lot of ricochets and a lot of shatters. But he's so close here with the armor piercing that some of the armor piercing is penetrating. But against a battleship with this much health and this much armor, you're not going to do nearly as much damage. Again, I would switch over to the high explosive here, and I would attempt to set fires. Now, the guy's already on fire in 2 spots, and he's burning down. You might as well try and set him on fire more so and cause more problems. Again, you can see the number of ricochets that he's getting, and he's not really doing a lot of damage with the armor piercing. You might get a lot of shatters with the high explosive against a battleship like this, but at the very least, you would be doing some additional damage. Now this guy is hanging on just barely, but SPR manages to secure the kill there with one last lucky hit there. And now the enemy team is down to just 2 ships. Somehow they've managed to pull it off with a little bit of a turnaround. But they're not in the best of situations here because they have a very, very low health battleship that is barely hanging on himself. Now, enemy battleship up there, enemy Iowa. is around that island. SPR has got him targeted, and he's going to go ahead and he's going to get both sets of torpedoes out there. That's when the enemy destroyer pops up, and look how much health this guy's got. He's definitely got more health than SPR, but SPR has the advantage that this guy is currently preoccupied dealing with the Izumo and shooting at him. So SPR is going to go ahead, he's going to get shots out there, and you can see the armor piercing doing an okay job there, but he does manage to secure the kill, partly in thanks to the Izumo managing to hit this guy with a nice, fat 16-inch armor piercing shell. Iowa in the distance there, well, he's managed to hit SPR, knock some stuff out with high explosive, but look at those torpedoes right on the mark, managing to connect with him. That's what you get for sailing a straight line when you know destroyers are nearby. And that kill, by the way, earns SPR his Kraken Unleashed in the game for a wonderful turnaround, a very close game, and a nice comeback, showing you that the Z46 can, if played well, do well in a game and carry a team effectively. 104,000 damage total done in the game. Devastating strike, Kraken Unleashed. 5 kills there, 3 fire set. Only 5 torpedo hits, though. However, top of the team for XP earned at well over 2,000 base XP. That Izumo, who survived, also earning over 2,000 base XP in the game, so shout out to him. Anyway, that's it for today's video, folks. If you liked the video, hit that like button, hit the subscribe, follow button, leave a comment down below. If you'd like to get semi-regular channel news and updates, you can do so by liking and following me on Facebook. If you'd like to help support me in the channel, as well as gain additional supporter perks, you can do so by becoming my supporter on Patreon. If you've got a replay like this one that you'd like to see featured on my channel, you can send it to my email. And if you'd like to watch me play various games live, you can do so by following me on Twitch. You can find the links for all of those in the video description down below. And as always, I'll see you next time. This is Captain Rye, signing off.